Hello, this is Chapter 3 of Weeds in the Garden of Freedom by Deborah J. Reeves. All rights to both the book and presentation are reserved. Settle in and we'll begin to read. Chapter 3, The Beginning of the Cataract. After the double cognac, Emmanuel succumbed to sleep. His head had nodded onto his chest in the companionable silence. Aki asked him something after a few minutes, and there was no answer. When Aki looked over, he felt gratitude. Even a few minutes of sleep would allow Emmanuel to keep moving forward in this territory of horrors that no one should ever have to march through. Sleep still evaded Aki, but in his tired state, his defenses against memories, both good and bad, were not as strong, and the memories began to play in his head. It started with the look on Philippe's face after he'd arrived at the Panged house, after Marie had accepted his proposal. It was the greatest look of awe that Aki had ever seen, and he imagined just how that must have felt. He had anticipated feeling it with Marie's grandmother. For him, it had never come. Once he stepped into that sad territory, the memories of disaster came thick and fast. He could barely catch his breath as they crashed over his psyche, one by one, in a never-ending cascade of pain. It went way back. He saw the way Claire looked at his brother, and he relived the realization that she would choose him. He saw himself rushing to the devastated chateau when they were going to remove his brother and sister-in-law's bodies to the church. He felt again his horror that their child was missing. Her body was not found. He remembered his obsessive search for Anne-Marie and his self-loathing at every dead end. He remembered the vicious anger he felt against Oscar for stealing Marie from him and his determination to make him suffer for it. Then it switched to the visit from Philippe and trying to bargain to take his place. That ended with self-loathing too. Then there was the phone call, the trip to Emmanuel and Christine's home, the flight, seeing Marie in such pain. What he would have given to spare her that pain. Bertie's pain, the funeral, the way the twins had tried so hard to comfort him. The tinkling of Francois and Aki's pocket watches triggered tears of loss. He prayed that the sound of the watches would not wake Emmanuel or anyone else on the plane, but he had to hear them both sing in unison. It was just a few notes, but they felt like dew on his parched and cracking soul. He prayed that Emmanuel would not wake and see his tears. He had no right to shed tears, he thought. After all, I'm no one in this scenario. But his heart contradicted him. It told him not so. He loved you, and you know it. The cascade of memories would not stop. It imposed itself on his mind, with minute detail. Jean-Claude, Van, Dr. D, and Michel stepped in to organize the events after the funeral, to lift some of the burden from the grieving family's shoulders. As the funeral drew to a close, Father Joe announced that there would be a reception with refreshments, and it would be served at Rob Roy's restaurant, not far from the Basilica, in an hour's time. The frigid February day helped the family to decide that only a few would be invited to the cemetery. Van and Michel would take all of the children, including Alicia and the twins, directly to the restaurant to ensure that everything was set. Colette had arranged for the babysitter to be there to help out with the children. Dr. D and Jean-Claude would be there at the graveside. All the little meaningless details were etched on Aki's brain. They clung like burrs. They all watched as the coffin was carried past them and out of the basilica. The heights of the notes of Bella Ciao that they had reached, and the short respite from the pain, only seemed to make the heaven-flung missives of resolve crash down with brutal impact. The notes of the triumphant song seemed to rain back down on them like shards of ice from the heavenly realms to which they had climbed, and they inflicted more pain in their tender heart wounds as they made impact. The passing of the coffin mocked their bravado. If any of them had thought for a moment that they would manage the emotions they felt, the impact of watching Philippe's coffin pass tore that illusion to shreds. Marie started to heave with sobs. Independently, Christine started sobbing, and so did Colette. Tears ran down strong men's cheeks. As Marie sobbed, the other women sobbed, and the men who loved them tried to hug them, hoping to keep their souls inside their bodies. The graveside service was short, and the cold wind threatened to tear the clothing from their bodies. When Father Joe had finished, Aki and Oscar tried to take Marie away from the graveside, but it was Bertie who finally stepped between her and the edge. When he had her full attention, he said, "Come, come now. I cannot lose Philippe and you. Come with me right now and choose to live. Choose, just like our mothers had to. Choose your own life and mine." He held out his hand, and she looked up into his face with a desolation beyond description. She lifted one foot and then almost fell against Bertie, and she walked away to the car with him. She tried to stop and turned twice, and twice Bertie refused to relinquish her hand. He stopped when she stopped for a few moments, but when she tried to turn, he tightened his grip on her hand. Philippe's ring dug into her fingers as Bertie pulled her forward. Their mother watched, sobbing from her seat in the car next to Oscar. Only Bertie could ever really help Marie. "Remember how he cried in the first few weeks of his life until I accidentally put them into the same crib?" Oscar asked. "I was terrified that something had happened to them that morning. They always slept best when they were together after that." Colette gave a wan smile at the memories. "It goes both ways," Oscar agreed. He did not put the car into gear until they saw Bertie's black Cadillac pull away from the curb in the cemetery. Aki cleared his throat in the back seat and said, "Thank God, Jean-Claude insisted that Bertie accompany her to Paris when I demanded that she return. I cannot imagine how much damage would have been done if I had forbidden that, as I was originally inclined to do. How can one man be so consistently wrong? I have so much to answer for." That's the end of chapter 3. We look forward to seeing you again for chapter 4, which is entitled Self-Recriminations. Thanks for coming. I remain your friend, Deb.